Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm gonna say let's get started. So again, I'm Amy Duval. I'm the studio technician here at the Medalta International Artists in Residence program at Medalta. Noriko Masuda is somewhere in here. And
Hi,
Noriko,
everyone.
hi, there you are. Hello. And Noriko is the residency coordinator here at the residency program. So it's she and I working together. Um, all right. So before we get started, I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. So here at Medalta, we honor and acknowledge that we are on Treaty 7 and Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Sika, the Kana, the Pikana, Stoney Nakoda, Tsuut'ina, as well as the Cree, Sioux, and the Saulteaux bands of the Ojibwa peoples. We also honor and acknowledge that we are on the homelands of the Métis Nation within Region 3. We acknowledge all Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis who have made Southern Alberta their home. So I'm sure many of you know about the Medalta International Artists in Residence program, but in case you don't, Medalta is set against the dramatic cliffs of the South Saskatchewan River in Medicine Hat, Alberta. So the 150-acre historic clay district was once home to some of Canada's most important clay factories, including Medalta Potteries, Highcroft China, National Porcelain, and Alberta Clay Products. The Medalta International Artists in Residence program operates out of the Shaw Center for Contemporary Ceramics, the building that actually almost all of us we're all in right now, all of the artists right now, and is designed to serve artists at all stages of their career. So we have a really interesting group of people to share work with you today. So we have students, emerging and established artists working together in our open, spacious, and semi-private studios. The studio experience here is one of cooperation and creativity. And artists come from all over the world and bring different experiences, techniques, and ideas to our unique studio space. So we're excited to share the work with you of our three student award resident recipients that have been here between the month of May and this month, June. So the student award residency is provided by Medalta and participating post-secondary institutions. And this award is intended to allow an undergraduate student in art to attend a 1-month residency with students from all across Canada in a dynamic group setting at the Medalta Artist Residency. This recipient will be selected or is selected on the basis of demonstrated excellence in art, a strong interest in ceramic art, and in experiencing an intensive residency. So first off, I would like to introduce Courtney Faulkner to you all. Courtney is a multidisciplinary artist based in Lethbridge, Alberta. They graduated with honors from the University of Lethbridge with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in 2021. So during their studies, they received multiple awards, most notably the Medalta Student Residency Award, which offered them a month-long ceramics residency, as well as the Roloff Fanny Foundation Photographic Award, in which they traveled to Mexico City to research Frida Kahlo. So they have shown their work in numerous solo and group exhibitions within Lethbridge and were part of a thesis show, an online thesis exhibition with Something Special Studios in New York. So I'd like to welcome Courtney Faulkner to share a bit more detailed information about her work with you all.
Hi, thank you for that introduction, Amy, and thank you everyone for coming. I'm just going to share my screen to share my presentation. Yeah, so as Amy said, I'm a multidisciplinary artist based in Lethbridge. I grew up in Southern Alberta. I grew up in Fort Macleod, and I've been in Lethbridge for 10 years now. And I recently just attended the artist residency at Medalta. I was there for the month of May. So my practice is really interested in feminism, ritual, witchcraft, queerness, folk knowledge, and ancestry. And my time at Medalta really allowed me to connect with those sort of things. So the first artist that I want to talk about, just sort of preface my talk and my understanding and my research, is Claude Cahun. They lived from 1894 to 1954, and they're a photographer. They're the first artist I was interested in my undergrad that made me really interested. They're super queer. They refer to themselves as being a neuter and having no gender, and they did lots of self-portraiture in costumes and characters. and they were super radical. And the second artist that I would like to talk about who really informs my practice is Frida Kahlo, who lived from 1907 to 1954. She's a Mexican painter known for her many self-portraits, and she is kind of like watered down in sort of the ways that she's represented in pop culture now. She was a communist, she was very political, and she was also queer. She's known to have relationships with women, namely Georgia O'Keeffe, which is really a cool thing to learn about when you think about how history is shared. And then this here is a project that was one of the first projects I made in my undergrad that I was really excited about. It is a 10 by 10 grid with 1 inch apart. So there's 100 little holes in the wall with these little sewing pins. And I took roses and pinned 1 petal in each. So very large installation piece, very temporal, very time consuming. And it changes as it dries in the scent of the roses. And then continuing on in my use with plants and interest in that, I started making inks with these plants. So on the left in the purple, that's rose petal ink, in the middle is marigolds, and then on the right, I believe is sunflower seeds. So I started distilling plants and making inks and playing with color by changing the pH balance of them. Rose petals are quite drastic. They go from like purple to teal, depending on if they're basic or if they are acidic. And then sort of concluding my final semester at university, I started working in plaster cast molds. And so I was making molds of a silicone rabbit vibrator. And with this, I was really thinking about sexuality and the intimate sexual relationship that you have with oneself. And I was interested in this like phallic shape that is often used by women. And I really just wanted to learn how to do mold making. That was a skill I wanted to get out of my university degree. And I had classmates who were, Nicole, who's here, actually was really helpful in teaching me how to make these. And so here's an example of them underglazed and glazed with clear and white glaze. These were kind of the tests that I made. I'd made 5 molds. I made 76 of these ceramic pieces. I was trying to make 100 before the studios were closed. So I kind of ended up packing up mid-March in 2020 with an array of pieces of ceramics that were at different varying stages of firing. So this piece here is one of those ceramic rabbits, and it's bisque fired. So it's this pale pink, it's matte, it's still porous to water. It hasn't been glazed yet. And what I started doing was doing video performances in my garden as a response to being removed from my studio and being isolated at home, and trying to finish this undergrad thesis project that I had started and not really having access to facilities. I'm not sure if you can hear me over the video, so I'll let this just play out. I hope the sound translated for you. I don't know if I shared my sound, but I started working with these pieces, and yeah, I was tying them to each other. I buried them in my garden. They broke unexpectedly. They became active in the sense that I was now making video and working with them, and interacting with them in with my body, and in a way that changes the meaning of the object and kind of changes what it originally was, because it's no longer that. It's made in ceramic now. So this here is a video animation that I made from a drawing class that I was in this spring called Telling Your Story with Mara Ramirez. And we were really encouraged to delve into our own symbology and like personal symbology and what those sort of things would mean to us. So things that came up for me a lot were hands, eyes, rain clouds, spirals, spiders, and water, like tears. And this is one of the pieces that I made while I was at Medalta. It's a large hollow form. I was really experimenting with glazes. I was trying to make speckled glazes and finding colors that I liked. And yeah, this is a form that I draw often. I will draw hands that reach around and hold each other. And I was really hoping to make more objects for these hands to hold, but there's still time for that. And I had a really fun time like making functional wares as well, making bowls and cups and just thinking about vessels and thinking about these objects being interacted with other people. Yeah, so, and a spider is kind of always an interesting thing for me. I learned a lot in glazing and firing this piece and trying to make it stand up and be tall. I bisque fired it on with the body held up and the legs dangling. And then when I glaze fired it, I set the legs down and it kind of shrunk down by the weight of its own body. And then I started making altars. This is something that sort of stems from my time in Mexico City. When I was there in December, and it was during the time of the Virgin de Guadalupe festival, where many people gather at the main basilica in the city to give offerings to Guadalupe. And she is a really interesting symbol. She's the Mother Mary, but she's also indigenous, to try to entice indigenous people of Mexico to be part of Catholicism. So there's altars to her all throughout the city. So I got really interested in making like really tiny objects that you could charge with significance and have these altars in your home and maybe set them up and put fresh flowers in them, or waters or essential oils or anything that would sort of have a personal meaning to you. Yeah, and I became interested in making all kinds of tiny things. I made these cigarettes in this ashtray in thinking about my friend Kristen Krein, who is also an artist, and she made tiny cigarettes when I first took my first dramas class with her by Tanya Duty, and just making tiny objects of kind of referencing my own work by making another a rabbit. I just showed you me holding them so you could sort of see the scale of how small they are. Yeah, I was interested in making sort of like mystical things and then also really mundane things, and kind of just seeing how tiny I could even make things. So yeah, I painted this magic 8-ball. Painting the yes was so small. Like when I was done painting and I like looked across the studio, I could not focus on anything far away. And I was like, okay, I need to like take a bit of a break for the day. But yeah, just interested in like these sort of like symbols that are like the magic 8-ball is a toy. It became popularized as a toy, but it has this sort of like esoteric significance to it. And then here's an example of some like wares that I made that are functional that I was really excited about. I mixed both of these glazes in the glaze kitchen at Medalta, and that's kind of the first time I've really mixed glazes in a large scale. So I made a midnight blue and then this white clouds there, a zinc crawl. So I think if I applied it more thickly, it would get kind of chunky and sort of break apart from itself. So yeah, lots to learn as you're making it. This is the bottom piece is actually an example of the zinc crawl being applied more thickly. And then here's an example of some like glazed rabbits. They were broken before I glazed them, and these were actually tests that sort of closed in on each other. They got stuck to each other in the kiln, but I found them more interesting than the other ones that I was making. So I think that's everything for me and my presentation. Thank you so much. And I guess I'll pass it back to Amy if you have any questions. I'll stop my share here. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Courtney. It was so nice to, I feel like you were here. It feels like a very long time ago that you were here, but also not long at all, even though I know it was just last month. But it was really nice to finally get to learn a bit more about your work other than what I saw you working on in the studio. So thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? I know I have a couple, but if anyone has any questions for Courtney, please feel free to unmute yourself and you can either pose your question yourself, or if you feel more comfortable posting in the chat, I can relay the question to Courtney for you. Either way is fine. But I had a couple questions actually, so maybe I'll just start, and if anyone else wants to chime in, please do. Um, my first thought was I really enjoyed, this is just more of a statement, not really a question, but I really enjoyed that statement where you said small objects being charged with significance. And I think just having, that's just a really interesting way of explaining those small things that we do like charge and like fill with significance in our homes. Um, but I was also wondering, like, because I know you spent a lot of time in the glaze lab here, and that wasn't something that you had maybe done too much of before. Like, how do you see the like this new kind of glazed surface treatment of your work kind of changing your work, and what kind of direction do you think that could potentially lead your work in? Like, is it going to go somewhere new or different, or do you think it's adding to kind of the content that's existing there right now already?
Okay, yeah. I think glazing my work has really given it a sense of completion. So, like mid-month, I actually had my partner bring me my like 38 bisqued like rabbits that I hadn't fired, and I'd had them for a year. And so then I actually got to like do the final step and glaze them. And glazing is like really, there's some unexpected elements there. You don't quite know what the colors are going to be. You don't know how things are going to change in the kiln. And that's really exciting for me. And I think also the like opportunity for color and texture is really interesting. Like I was pretty interested when my glazes would like crackle or when they would mix together and like make an unexpected sort of thing. I actually like made speckle glazes with just like random studio glazes that Carmen had left over from a previous resident, and like didn't know what color they would be, and bisque fired them and then added them to glaze and just sort of saw what that looked like. So yeah, I'm super excited to learn more about what the ingredients for glazes do and what colorants do, and start to get to a point where I could like alter my glaze recipes too, just to try to find the colors that I'm looking for. So yeah, I think it feels more complete, and it feels like there's a lot more opportunity to make like the texture of your ceramics a lot more interesting.
Yeah, there's so much potential there. So I was really excited for you to be in the glaze lab. It's always really exciting to see people in there, especially when they maybe don't get the chance to be in a glaze lab equipped in that kind of way and get to play with like all of the different options in there. So it's really exciting. Um,
You feel like a chemist too. Like it's really fun. It really satisfied that like
yeah.
science desire for me to be like meticulously measuring things and mixing them
Mm-hmm.
together and like wearing an aspirator mask the whole time. Like it's pretty fun.
Yeah, yeah, it is very, yeah, it's very exciting. I agree. Um, okay, does anyone else have any questions? Um, what's next for you, Courtney?
I'm going to try to book the university's gallery downtown to have my undergrad thesis show. I haven't had an exhibition of my student work because everything was closed. So I'm hoping to have like a week or two long solo exhibition in Lethbridge. Um, yeah, and then kind of from there, I'm just kind of learning how to navigate being a professional artist and like applying for shows and finding opportunities to show my work. So yeah, hopefully I'm putting together a show in the fall to be in Lethbridge.
Cool.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks.
that would be amazing. Please pass that information on to us when that does happen. We would like to share about it. Um, we have
In
a
the chat. Oh yeah, go ahead, Amy.
yeah. Someone was asking to please talk about your rabbit.
Okay. Yeah, it kind of started out as just like something a bit cheeky when I was making them at school. I knew that silicone would be an easy like material to make a plaster mold with because plaster won't stick to it. I was intrigued by the very like symmetrical, smooth shape. And yeah, it was quite an easy object to make into a mold for like a first time making a mold. Um, and I don't think I really realized it at the time, but I think I was really like I think that kind of is how all art making happens is like you make something and then afterwards you're like, oh, okay, like I kind of get what I'm talking about. Um, but yeah, I was interested in like sort of making a space for people to like talk about sexuality in a way that's like really like non-confrontational and um is kind of something that's like maybe a bit more private, but I wanted it to be a bit obscure. So my like sort of dream in showing these works is to have them like either like laid out in a pattern or stacked upon each other in sort of a mound, so that you might like approach the work and see like a kind of amorphous blob of color, and you'd have to get closer to really understand what the object is. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. Is like I'm really interested to show that work because I really want to hear what people think about it and how they respond to it. Yeah, and like the color of it really changes the way that those objects are read. So that was really cool. Yeah.
All right. Oh, um, we have from Nicole. It says, Courtney, very excited to see your work. I'm interested to see the sensibility that you expressed in the rose petal grid and the plant dyes work, how that will play into your exploration of glaze materials and surface exploration. I'd love to chat more about your time at Medalta when you're back in Lethbridge. That's a nice message. Courtney, if you want to share any of like your contact information in the chat, you're welcome to do that, or even your Instagram handle or your website, anything like that, you're welcome to share in the chat to direct people where to find out more about you and get in touch.
Cool. I'll do that. Thanks. Nicole, we'll go for coffee.
All right, so I think we're gonna move on unless there's anything else anyone wanted to add, but I think up next we have Nicole Ponsart. So Nicole is a sculptor who earned her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from MIAIR University of Art and Design with a major in visual arts. Her practice is primarily in the medium of ceramics, and she works to bridge nature with conceptual modernism through her large-scale sculptures. She believes in enriching the arts community through the sharing of knowledge, impacting positive experiences, and collaboration with others. Nicole is the recipient of numerous scholarships through the British Columbia Arts Council and the Government of British Columbia, as well as the recipient of the Student Summer Residency at the Medalta Historic Clay District in Medicine Hat, Alberta, where she is right now. Nicole was most recently awarded the Quiem Choi Emerging Artist Scholarship through the Port Moody Arts Council in 2020 and hosted her second solo exhibition in May of 2021. So I'm going to welcome Nicole to unmute herself and share her screen when she's ready, and we'll get started.
Awesome.
Right,
Thank you so much. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yep.
Maybe Amy, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you sound good to me.
Let me just share my screen. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for everyone joining in. This has been much anticipated for us all, and we're happy to kind of get on with sharing our practices with you. I'm going to be showing my grad project from MIAIR. This year, I graduated with Bachelor of Fine Arts in Visual Arts, and it was a challenging year being a fourth year ceramics student during a pandemic. And going into the year, I had ambitious plans and had to drastically rescale my expectations of what I wanted for my education and my experience at MIAIR. I set out with the intention of doing some solo shows, even during a pandemic, and I knew that that would be a bit challenging. So the next couple photos here are of a solo exhibition I did at MIAIR this year entitled Imagined Landscapes. And this rendition of it was spatial awareness. So I was playing with the notion of imagining myself in places that I couldn't travel to because of the COVID-19 restrictions. I imagined being able to drive through the deserts of the southwestern United States to eventually make my way to Texas, where some of my family lives. Being able to do this allowed me to not only keep myself very busy during a very hectic school year and pandemic, but allowed me to express my own creativity in different ways than I had normally been able to do in the years at MIAIR. painting these large scale murals in behind my sculptural work was a really fun meditative experience, and one that I wanted to explore more throughout the year. With these pieces, I liked how the surfaces, the matte surfaces on the clay itself kind of danced with the walls in behind, how you could see through these kind of holes and shapes and see the colors and shapes in behind. It really gave you a sense of this almost wonderment and like imaginative space, something that I felt inspired through reading Alice in Wonderland as a child. So creating this almost made up, imagined space that I can imagine myself in. Now, through this project with Imagined Landscapes, I made several pieces that were all inspired by the southwestern United States deserts and the landscape there. And I wanted to try my hand at displaying them in different ways that were almost complementary to the different pieces that I had created. Some of the pieces I created were in a series, and others were in series that were more meant to be together. So trying to encompass one idea and have all of the pieces shown together. These next set of photos are photos at the LePont Gallery in Richmond, British Columbia. We were fortunate enough, a group of ceramic students from MIAIR, to exhibit our work here over the course of 3 months. With the gallery being slow due to COVID-19 and lots of the artists internationally that couldn't come to Canada and Vancouver to display their work, we were fortunate enough to have the space for such a long period of time. And I think there were about 15 or 16 of us that rotated through the space, and we all got to display our work. And it was a phenomenal experience, as most places were closed. Even the galleries at our school were closed. So it was just tremendous to be able to do this. I liked how I was able to mix some of the pieces I made earlier in the year with some of the more recent pieces, and getting to explore through making and keeping myself busy almost became my own sense of, or my own take on self-care. I like to stay busy and I like to be active in my studio, and I felt that that really helped me kind of keep my mind set on the horizon and realize that like this wasn't going to last forever. It was just going to be for now. But being able to be in my studio and at MIAIR making really allowed myself to just kind of relax and keep focused. Some of these pieces, it's hard to imagine scale, but these are about 2.5 to 3 feet wide and tall. They're quite heavy. They're finished with different sigillatas, underglazes, glazes, and paints. I was really inspired by Ken Price's work this year, and I'm fortunate enough that there's several books here at Medalta on him, and I've been kind of picking away through his work. His use of surface was something that really inspired this work, and I wanted to try my hand at mixing ceramic materials with different paints, acrylic paints and oil paints, and see what kind of surfaces I could come up with. And like I said earlier, these murals were really fun to paint, and I really fell in love with them. And the most heartbreaking thing about doing them was that I couldn't bring them home with me. So these live at the LePont Gallery now. This is my last show. It's actually being taken down today by my mom and my boyfriend. Thank you. They are taking it down in Port Moody, and this was a show that I got to do, a part of the Quiam Choice Scholarship that I earned in the fall, and it was money towards putting on a solo show. So I was able to share my most recent work, and it was a really great experience. I really wanted to try my hand at building bigger, and it proved to be pretty challenging when you're in a studio alone and you have to social distance from everyone. There were less hands to help, and things were big and heavy, and it was a bit of a challenge and a fun learning curve, and something that really inspired the direction of where my work is going now and where I hope to see my work go in the future. The large piece in the center is about 4.5 feet long. It weighs over 150 pounds, and I got very strong moving it around by myself during the pandemic. I had originally intended for it to stand upright, and you know, in ceramics, sometimes things just don't go the way that you want them to. And with rounded bottoms and curvy, flowy forms, sometimes they just don't sit perfectly straight. So I always like to share that about that piece. A lot of these pieces, my idea behind their creation was being able to build in such a way that they could be situated any which way on a plinth, and they didn't necessarily have a designated flat bottom. That was something I challenged myself to do this year, and something some of my professors helped me work through over Zoom in our ceramic classes at Emily Carr. So it was a really fun experience to build this big, and who knew that this would really guide the way that my work is going. With the surfaces in these, I wanted to try something a bit different than I had tried before and get away from some of the color. I used iron oxides, oil paints, and underglazes to achieve the surfaces you see here. This surface came as a happy accident, and originally these pieces were completely different. And once I finished them, I decided that I just hated them so much. So I covered them entirely in paint thinner and stripped off what I had done and scrubbed with a steel brush to get this paint off of these things. And it started to leave behind this kind of these almost like iridescent metallic marks from the steel brushes I was using. And I really loved the shadow that it created. So through my happy accident, I was able to come up with these surfaces, and I'm a lot happier with how they turned out. And I think they complement the clay and the forms themselves. Of course, it's always hard to see in a photo, but in person, I really enjoy them. There's me, a picture of me not paying attention to the camera. Part of this series you can kind of see in the background are some of these hanging bean forms. When we had our things stolen last week, I have a book where I've recorded these beans, and it was stolen from me from Medalta, and I was so grateful later this week to get that back. And it was just years of research and work, and I'm so grateful that we were able to get some of that stuff back, and I have that resource back in my hands. So those pieces act as test tiles for me, and I stamp numbers into each one, and I think I have over 300 of them now. And people were really enjoying when I would display them as a set, and would always want to buy maybe one or two, and I just couldn't bear the thought of giving up one or two of these little numbered things. It's like, oh, I'll be missing number 38 if I do that. So I made some of these test tiles to accompany these terracotta and stoneware forms to act as almost like little mementos that you would pick up on a road trip. So that same notion of imagined kind of landscapes. I wanted to kind of they were acting as almost like rocks, things you'd take home with you on like a road trip. But I think that's the end of my show. So I'll pass it back to Amy in case anyone has any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. That was great. I have a couple questions again. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or post in the chat. Can you talk a little bit about your building process at this kind of scale? Just some of the technical kind of considerations that you have to do, what loading those pieces is like, especially in a pandemic time where you said, yeah, we can't be that close to anybody. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so as the other artists have probably figured out, I'm a night owl, and I stay up all night working on my work. I really like, I don't know why, I just have always worked better that way. I was like, morning is for reading and catching up on things around the house, and at night I would go to the studio and build, and that was when I was most productive, but it was also when the least amount of people were around. So it became a challenge this year that I didn't think of when my things were almost ready to be moved into kilns. Now, yes, they are very heavy and I could sort of move them on my own, but I made friends with the security guards at Emily Carr and educated them on how I liked them to be moved, and we would do it together. So that was really, it was fun. That was like fun and funny for me that way. And if anyone ever came through the studio to grab like something they forgot, I would just pounce on them with like, oh, hey, can you help me move this? So in the future, I'd like to have a better system, maybe like a forklift or something. But yeah, teamwork was how I moved them, and I just physically like grab onto them and move them where I need them to go. Now building them is, I don't know, it's very relaxing to me. I always have like music on or a podcast or a TV show in the background, so I'm always just listening to something. And I build them with slab and coil and a paddle. Through my time at Emily Carr, learning how traditional Korean pottery was made, I really loved the efficiency and the tactility of the way that they built their large forms with paddles. And I adopted that same type of technique. I really thought that it helped to get out air bubbles and seams and things like that. So I would paddle them or use a serrated rib to really like, get the surface level plane, I guess, like level and smooth. And then afterwards I would go in with like a wet sponge or a metal rib and smooth it out. But yeah, just time and energy is how I built them with slab and coil. It just takes, build a bit, let it sit for a while, firm up, and then just keep going. But it does take time, and I'm always building several at a time so that I can always keep myself busy.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It's so interesting because I feel like I don't really see you at the studio very much, but I know you're here because I'll walk past your table and all these forms will just be popping up overnight, and I'll be like, oh, okay, there's a lot happening here. So it's always fun to come in the morning and see these new forms that have been sprouting out of your table. Nicole Reed-Mueller is asking, where do you pull your ideas about form? These look as though they might be derived from nature, like the rocks around the ocean that become carved by the tide, yet some are also very bodily. Just curious if you can speak to where, I guess, kind of your ideas about forms come from.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know. Like, there's not one specific thing that ever inspires me. I really like the rock formations that I was doing through my research for my grad project for my Imagined Landscapes work. And I had, at the beginning of COVID, stuck at home. I needed something to do. I was used to being so busy and I just had nothing to do. Like, I painted my house and then all of these chores became completed and I had nothing to do. So I bought myself some atlases and like map books and planned out a fake route to where I wanted to go and investigated the geological formations along the way just out of sheer curiosity. And I found that really drove the direction of my work, the like land and rock formations in Utah and Arizona, most notably. And then, I mean, being in British Columbia, there's always just so much to explore and look at. And we live a close walk to the ocean, and definitely some of the rocks and formations there have driven the work in a certain direction. And then just being a part of the community at Emily Carr, getting to see and hear all of the different artists that inspire other people's work and my instructors' work. And it's just such a vibrant community of sharing and exchange of knowledge. So I found lots of artists through our talks and through our classes, and I would pick up little things along the way that inspired me or that I liked, or little video clips of how people built. And I don't usually sketch out my work. I just start building and I just kind of let it go where it wants to go. I know that that's probably pretty unusual for some people, and I don't know, I just found that was the most relaxing, meditative way for me to go about my work. And yeah, I hope that kind of that answers your question a little bit.
I think that kind of way of working actually makes a lot of sense because it's very intuitive and like more immediately responsive to the material, because I think drawing doesn't always translate in ways that we think it will when it comes to working in a different material. Yeah, I think especially with sculptural ceramics, I feel like I work in that way too. So I can definitely understand that more like immediate, intuitive, responsive, like this needs to go this direction as you're kind of building. All right, is there any other questions from Tanya Judy's asking Henry Moore as a reference potentially?
Yes, they've come up. Ken Price has come up. Simone Bodmer Turner from New York has come up a lot.
Barbara
And
Hepworth?
I don't know. Yes, that as well. I'm trying to think of more, and now I'm put on the spot, and I can't think of anything. But I don't know. Like, I'm not one for like the computer and social media and things like that. But I mean, when I would spend time online, and I made an Instagram account for my ceramics work, and you just start to find people that you kind of vibe with their work and you really like what they're doing. And I've made friends over Instagram with people I've never met just because I like their work and how they make. And yeah, I don't know, you just kind of pick up little things along the way and kind of make it your own.
Yeah, of course. I think that makes a lot of sense. Nicole, do you want to share if you have a website or any way for people to get a hold of you? If you're comfortable posting that in the group chat, that would be great. So people can first come find you afterwards. Yeah, otherwise, I think we're ready to move on to our third student artist in resident who's here currently. I'm going to introduce Zoe Leung. Zoe is currently a third-year Bachelor of Fine Arts student at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. A daughter of immigrant parents from Hong Kong, she grew up surrounded by art and music from a very young age. After some time pursuing an education in science and language, she decided to enroll at KPU to pursue fine arts. Under the guidance of her instructors, Leung has come to love ceramics and installation. Her work often speaks on her personal connections with the current world. Past exhibitions include Stepping Stones, Maple Washing, A Disruption, and Coming Together at the Spruce and Arbutus Galleries in Surrey, British Columbia. So I'd like to welcome Zoe, if she's here.
Hello.
Oh, there you are.
I'm here.
Hello. All right. So Zoe, I'll let you share your screen and I'm going to mute myself and
Okay.
let you take it away.
How's my sound, everyone?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Okay. Please feel free to interject in the chat if anybody has any accessibility needs, like if I need to slow down or if I need to speak up at all. All right, let me just share my screen. Okay, it says share your computer audio. Okay, so it looks like I don't have the Zoom audio device, so unfortunately I won't be able to share my sound during a video clip, but I hope that doesn't take away too much from the experience. All right, so my name is Zoe Leung. I hail from Richmond, BC, also known as unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations. Themes of my work include migration, climate change, and identity. I work a lot about my environment, my culture, and my upbringing. Okay, my background is in science, music, and art. And here I started off in sculpture and painting at my school. I work a lot in interdisciplinary art. So I like to combine mediums a lot. So here you can see a painting that has a sculpture embedded onto the surface. Process is very important to me, so I really enjoy mold making and slip casting. Personal connection coming through art is also very important to me. And by what I mean by personal connection is I connect the most with ceramics because of the connection with earth. And I really enjoy the tangible connection with material. And I bring things full circle by communicating my love for the world around me that way. So I really enjoy ceramic also because it is fragile and durable at the same time, and how that's echoed in nature and humanity, how human beings and Mother Nature are strong and weak at the same time. And my goal through art is to explore this through organic material and content. So this here is a slip cast mooncake project that I did in 2020. It combines the backyard birds of BC with traditional mooncake motifs, which is like a pastry, a ceremonial pastry. And it's titled Yut, which means moon in Cantonese. So I have a passion for social justice and intersectionality that comes through in my work. I like to talk about colonialism, imperialism, human rights, and examples of that are the recent Hong Kong anti-extradition movement. I have a passion also for identity politics and belonging, as well as touching on cultural appropriation and examples of how that can affect someone. So this is an example of my work titled Gravity, and there's suspended ceramic slip cast birds that are supposed to be stuck in a tar pit, and it's ideally supposed to give this push and pull effect of whether the birds are trapped or flying away. And this is a nod to the Hong Kong extradition movement and how people are stuck at home. This is some pictures of my process. So the tiles you can see here are slip cast and underglazed, and then the birds are cast and then altered. So each one is different. Okay, just waiting for the next slide here. So I like to inform my work with very specific political things, such as my culture and current events. But I still like them to speak to a very general audience. So sometimes they can be relatable, sometimes they're not. And I like to use banal imagery of nature. So you can see here, I have succulents and plants. And I like to use beauty at a surface level in order to communicate what I'm trying to communicate. So this here is another suspended work, and they are thrown shapes that are supposed to evoke the moon. And this is titled Yut Part 2, also means moon in Cantonese. There's thrown forms and they're altered again. So simple titles I like to use to title my work because I don't like to incorporate too much word and poetry art in my practice. I want the designs and the forms to speak for themselves and for people to be able to interpret the works in their own way, since they're, you know, informed by, you know, politics and current events. But I like my viewers to be able to give their own ideas into the pieces, and to be able to connect to them on a personal level in their own personal way. So this is a slipcast peony project that I did in conjunction with an English class. This is a set of mahjong tiles that I created most recently. It's titled Jewel because it's supposed to evoke a family jewel or like an heirloom set kind of situation. So mahjong is a Chinese game made out of tiles, similar to dominoes. And I created my own set. Here you can see the installation view. I created my own set in response to a in response to a news article that informed people about a set called American Mahjong. Well, Mahjong is a Chinese game, but some Americans actually created their own set and culturally appropriated this very traditional game. So here's the game being played. And Mahjong is a very family-oriented game, and for someone to appropriate this and change it, it really takes away from the culture. So here is a example of what I'm doing at Medalta. This is a traditional Ming Dynasty ancient Chinese gaiwan, and a gaiwan is a lidded teacup with a saucer, as you can see. So I'm interested in this form and how porcelain can represent just like skin as a blank canvas. And this here is an example of the cultural significance of these gaiwans and how they are used at dim sum places, their connection with my heritage. Yeah, this is the Leung tea house in Hong Kong, which is a very historical place. And I'm interested in how the blank canvas of porcelain can be related to the blank canvas of skin. So my goal is to use surface decoration and China painting to make comparison with tattoo culture, and specifically Asian American, Asian Canadian tattoo culture. So here you can see some examples of different artists that will take Asian iconography and kind of communicate their ideas about tattoo culture in their own specific ways. Yeah, so these are icons of Chinese culture. We have a white rabbit candy, a Vita soy lemon tea. And here you can see an example of the work that I've been doing here. I've been doing a lot of tests, so throne forms, and then I've been slip casting these gaiwans, these lidded teacups. I've participated in a wood firing recently, which is a really great learning example with Jim Edscorn and Joan Matsuzaki. And yeah, I plan to do more tests and, you know, experiment here at my time at Medalta. So here you can see my contact information, and I will put that in the chat as well. Okay, thank you very much. And I'll pass it back to Amy.
All right, thank you so much, Zoe. All right, so I'm gonna open it up for a brief Q&A session. So if anyone has any questions, please post them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and turn on your video if you like, to ask Zoe a question directly. But I do have a couple questions while we wait for some other people to potentially ask a question. For your, I was really interested in your Mahjong tiles game and how you set that up on that table so that people could play it, and that video that you showed. Is that something that you would continue to do in the future? Like, what can you talk a little bit more about kind of viewer interactivity and the kind of role that plays in your work? Is that something that you see kind of spanning across all of your work, or is it just something for that specific piece?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit about interdisciplinary art and combining mediums. So I'm really interested in, you know, even combining ceramic work with video work and performance. So I've done a little bit of that. And the idea is that, you know, ceramics is something tangible and material. And I really want to use that feeling to communicate an idea, and you know, using this tool and another art form, by combining these, then I can be more effective in what I'm trying to say. So I don't see it necessarily as, you know, something that I want to really continue doing, but just the idea that I can combine multiple mediums is really, you know, where I see myself taking my practice.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay. What's next for you, Zoe, after you finish your residency here at Medalta?
Well, I'm going to move on to my 4th year at Kwantlen Polytechnic, and you know, start my grad show, and then hopefully moving to Ottawa and getting some experience working in a studio and having my own practice, and then applying for an MFA.
Cool.
Yeah.
What is it about Ottawa?
Well, I lived in Montreal for a while previously, so I'm kind of drawn to metropolis cities, and Ottawa is like close enough to a big city, but also more suburban, which is like where I'm from. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Thank you for posting your contact information in the chat. So if anyone has any further questions for Zoe, please direct them to either her Instagram or her Gmail. But now we're gonna move on to our final talk of the day. Thank you so much for your thoughtful presentation, Zoe. It was really nice to learn more about everyone's work so far. So our final talk for the day is Fredi Rahn. Fredi is the recipient of our Strojich Fellowship. So the Medalta Strojich Fellowship is an annual fellowship, and it's designed as an opportunity for a mid-career Canadian ceramic artist to spend a month in an immersive residency environment in order to further enrich and nourish their ceramic practice. Recipients of this fellowship receive a stipend, a spacious, semi-private furnished studio space, and 24-hour access to the Shaw Center for Contemporary Ceramics. This fellowship is made possible by the generous donations from Gwen, a longtime supporter of this residency. So Fredi Rahn was born in Harlow, Essex, of the United Kingdom, to German immigrants, and came to Canada with her family when she was 3. She was introduced to clay as a child and attended Sheridan College School of Crafts and Design after high school, and then completed her BFA at Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. After her studies, she settled in Vancouver and continued her ceramic practice. She was one of the founders of the East Side Culture Crawl, a studio tour now in its 25th year. Along with her studio practice, she has also worked as an educator, teaching in the community at the Shadbolt Center for the Arts, at Emily Carr University and Kwantlen Polytechnic. Previously, she attended residencies at the Archie Bray Foundation, Watershed,
Arte Talavera in the Banff Center for the Arts. Her son Henry is beginning his university studies in the fall, and the Medalta residency is her first since just before he was born. So welcome, Fredi. And you're welcome to unmute yourself and share your screen when you are ready. And I'll let you take it away.
All right, thank you. Now I'm just going to share my screen. Ah, this isn't it. Sorry.
Okay, you're teasing us with all these beautiful images of pots.
Oh. No.
I think,
Oh, I'm sorry.
is this PowerPoint right now or no?
I can't find it.
Fredi, it looks like it's at the bottom, the second from the right. Isn't that the presentation? Beside the Danish chair?
Yeah, there's one that says Medalta presentation template, and it looks like there's
my eyeballs aren't working.
So if you scroll all the way to the bottom in
Yeah.
that last row, the second one from the right says Medalta presentation template.
Why can't I see it?
Do
I
you
know it's there, I just can't see it.
Do you see image 8253 at the bottom?
Yeah.
It's just right beside there.
Oh, I can't see it because you guys are in the way.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Hey.
Okay. Hi. Thank you so much for coming. Now this is in the way. Hello. Thank you so much for coming. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Medalta and to Gwen Strojich for having me here. This is just such an amazing facility and an opportunity, and it's such a beautiful, inspiring place to be and work. I wish I could stay longer. It's gone so fast. I do live and work in Vancouver on the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. So I really love trees, and I'm not sure why I'm talking about this, but this was my backyard for 16 years, and I spent those years developing the garden.
Sorry,
And this is the first tree that I planted after a lot of research and consideration. I came across the description of this Katsura tree. In spring, heart-shaped leaves emerge in pairs, bronzy purple, changing to blue-green. In autumn, the color display changes again as the leaves turn clear yellow or apricot, and the fallen leaves have the scent of burnt sugar.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you for a second? Can anyone else see the presentation? Because I just see the image folder.
No, and I think all you have to do, Fredi, is open it and then share screen again. I think because you shared screen on the folders, it didn't share your actual presentation.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, let's try again. Share screen.
I can also run downstairs and
No, I got it.
help if we get stuck.
Thank you. Is that good?
Yes.
I'm gonna go back because that tree is so beautiful, and I just
Please. Sorry, I wasn't sure if everyone else was seeing something different than what I was seeing, but you're good.
Oh, now it stopped again. You see this? No.
No, if you go back to
My godfather.
Are you able to open your presentation? I'll come down. Hold on.
looks really nice there in that studio, Fredi.
Where you see me on where the photo that I have up, or the
no, oh well, that looks nice too. No, the behind you, your surroundings look nice.
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, you're joining again, or do you
Yeah, I got.
or did I one? So you're still in here. So click on
Okay.
that.
So
And then
now,
I think if you click on that one, so the Medalta,
but
and then press share.
okay. I'm just gonna go back.
Yeah, you can go to the top slide if you want, and then just, can anyone see the PowerPoint presentation now?
Can you see?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yay. Okay. So a tree in the fall, when you walk through the backyard, it smells like caramel. It's pretty awesome. And behind it is my studio, which was just in a little garage. As Amy said in the introduction, I came to Canada as a young kid. My parents are German immigrants, and it's interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot, about what that immigrant experience is like. I feel like, I was part of an invisible minority. But at home, my parents were like really hung on to their culture, and there was a lot of things in our home, like just sort of food and language and just kind of holiday rituals that were celebrated, and that made us realize as kids how important this was to our family. My mother collected pottery, or collects pottery, and this is from Höfenshausen in the Westerwald, which is a historically important center of salt glazed ceramic. So we had a lot of this kind of work in my home growing up. And I started pottery classes when I was a kid, and then went to Sheridan College, and then to Nova Scotia College of Art. And this is my professor, Walter Ostrom's work. And I think his teaching was really, really important in sort of forming my ideas about why I wanted to make pottery and why that was important. His teaching about historical ceramics and the conceptual possibilities of pottery and systems of decoration are, I think, really important in my sort of foundational learning of why I make pots. And I think the most important thing he ever said to me, and I will never forget it, is he said, you can make anything you want in your studio. And it's there's so much freedom in that, to just like know that in this space that you create for yourself to make work, anything is possible. And so I almost exclusively make tableware. This is a piece that was one of the first things I started here at Medalta, so it's just a work in progress. And I was thinking about knitting and baskets, and that came out of it. So the first number of years in my independent studio practice, I worked with earthenware clay and low temperature glazes, and I really worked on thinking about pattern and developing a color palette and figuring out sort of systems of how to draw on three-dimensional surfaces, what kinds of mark making I wanted to use, and what kinds of materials I wanted to work with. And then in 1998, I went to Helena, Montana, and did a summer residency at the Archie Bray Foundation. And I think one of the things I've always really loved about the ceramics community is that it is such a collaborative sharing culture. So potters and ceramic artists have always kind of banded together to share resources and work on, pool their labor to do firings together. So that was where I started working with atmospheric firing, salt and soda, and wood firing. And through that, I really started to think about how to put surface decoration into the plastic surface of the wet clay. So starting to work with stamping and texturing on the surface of the pieces I was making. So So the built environment is a really important sort of source of information and research for me for my work. I love looking at architecture and at textiles and at clothing, how those things are manufactured, how seams are put together, how a roof sits on top of a wall, how these silos sit in the landscape like a group of canisters. I think that informs how I want my pots to sort of the kind of presence I want them to have. And in the garden is where I think the built environment and the kind of natural environment come together. So again, this is my backyard. So how a vine will kind of twine itself around a structure, and kind of being creative with trying to find hardscaping solutions to a trellis. So using an old mattress, the remains of the coil springs of an old mattress, or playing with sort of making a functional fence post top out of a ceramic kind of decorative element. This was another residency I attended or participated in. It was two parts. The first was in Mexico, and we worked in a historical factory and had access to all of the kind of resources of the factory, from their materials to their skilled labor. So it was a way of kind of taking my ideas about form and almost kind of translating them into a different language. So taking a decorative pattern from their catalog and applying it to my work. The kitchen is a place that I love to spend time, and it's a kind of place that it's almost a meditative practice to kind of rustle through a cookbook or rustle through the spice cabinet and the kitchen cabinet and the pantry to sort of figure out what's around and what I can rustle together for a meal. And I think it's really central to my practice of making pots. I like thinking about why people use pots. I like thinking about the pots in their environment, in the kitchen and on the dining table. And I think making functional objects, it's appealing to me because there are boundaries to work within, and I like working in series and working in multiples, and kind of trying to push the individuality of each piece within a series, and trying to kind of play with different ways of applying the surface, variations with the handle. And I think it's so interesting to see how the pieces can evolve just by kind of making them over and over again. I think the engineering of a piece is really interesting to me, how you have to sort of figure out at what stage to do each step, at what stage to cut into the piece, at what stage to press a stamp into the piece, and how that affects the surface and the kind of the finish and the line of each piece of work. I think pots can also be kind of supporting players in an aesthetic experience. So this is a collaboration I did with a floral designer, Fanu Igal, who took some of my pieces and used them as parts of part of her work in her floral arranging. And I think pots can be that. They can be kind of it can be sort of your favorite mug that you drink coffee out of every morning, but it can also be this kind of pedestal or frame for another kind of work. So teaching's also been a really important part of my development. I get so much out of working with students, and I work with students. I do work with children, but also with adults as well. And I think of the classroom as a kind of laboratory for just like experimenting with ideas, for figuring out how other people's creative processes work, and for learning from my students as much as I hope they learn from me. So last September, I moved out of my home and put most of my belongings into storage. And I was really lucky in that a friend offered me access to her basement studio. And so I was working in I started working in this very small space and with very limited time, because I have an almost full-time job. And it just really changed my practice. It's sort of like these new conditions were this limitation that made me think about a new way of making. And I just started hand building and just making these kind of working with this kind of pinchy slab method, and kind of making parts and trying to figure out how to assemble them into different ways. And so it's just kind of almost like playing with Lego, like kind of just making a bunch of parts and then figuring out how they look together or how I can build them together in different ways. So I've been here at Medalta for, I guess, 3 weeks or so. I am really bad. I have a terrible, terrible sense of direction when I'm trying to navigate around. So I decided last week when I was going to the grocery store, I was going to drive to the grocery store without the navigation app. So I turned off the phone and I drove to the store and I got there. It's cool, like 5 minutes away. Got there without getting lost, got my stuff. And then I turned around to come back and all of a sudden I missed a turn and I'm on a bridge and I'm going over the railroad tracks and I knew that I was lost. So no big deal. I pulled over and I turned on my phone and Siri navigated me back to the studio here. But I've been thinking about that experience and I feel like where I am right now is not where I expected to be in my life. And I thought I'd have a sort of clearer direction of where my new home was going to be set up. And it's all kind of, I just feel a little bit lost right now. And it's uncomfortable and it's disorienting sometimes, and it's a little bit scary. And I think what I've learned about it is that it's okay to be uncomfortable, and I'm just trying to lean into that, and I'm trying to slow down and trying to pay attention to the things that I might not normally notice, and also like just to reach out for help when I feel like I really need that, the voice of Siri in the background telling me where to turn right or left. And it's interesting. It's so great how this community just comes out and helps each other out for all kinds of reasons. But when you ask for help, it's always there. So thank you everyone for coming. Please ask questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, Fredi. That was really beautiful. And thank you for being so candid with us all at the end too. Like, I feel like when I first started here too, Noriko always says that we like offer counseling and support as a staff here, and how intense the residency can be and how it can, I don't know, be kind of like a catalyst for so many different things, I think, creatively and sometimes personally. And yeah, there's lots of people here who are very interested in helping everyone who come through this space. So you're all here. Tanya R also says, that was really beautiful, Fredi. Thank you for sharing. Joe says, hi, Fredi. Do you think the Medalta pottery style will have an influence on your future work in any way?
I think, Joe, if you're asking about like the kind of the traditional pots that are made here in the factory, in the museum, I think maybe not so much that, but what I'm seeing here that I think is really, really beautiful are the kind of the old industrial objects and structures that are kind of laying around. There's these beautiful beehive kilns and just all these old carts and all this kind of machinery that was all part of and still is used in making ceramic objects. So I think that's more where I'm seeing that go.
Mm-hmm. Corinne says, hi, Fredi. So great to hear your journey to your new work. If you ever get lost on the road and your phone says you're near Yellowknife, come on by and visit. Thank you. If you're driving for that long, you're very lost. Yeah. Say, I had a question, or I guess maybe just a cue or a prompt, I guess, to say a little bit more. I thought it was really interesting what you were kind of saying about the boundaries of functional pottery. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how these boundaries can if they're like if there's sometimes like a hindrance to creativity, or they're like a framework for creativity to kind of like grow or manifest in kind of different ways. If that makes sense.
I think it does. And I think the answer for me is that my temperament is such that if I have too many choices, I end up doing nothing. And back in the day when I went to the video store, I would often come home and with nothing because there were just too many things to choose from. Mm-hmm. So I think the thing about function is it's yes, it gives me a boundary, but it's also a starting point. So I think to start from a known point, and then kind of expand upon it from there. The other thing about function, so let's say for example, cups. I mean, you could say a cup is a cup is a cup, but there are cups that are specifically for, a shot of whiskey, or for a cafe latte, and one of my favorite experiences as a potter is when I'm at a show selling my work, is watching people come in and engage with the work by picking up every cup and finding, it's like they're trying on shoes, like they're trying to find their cup, the one that fits them. And to me, that's it's such a learning experience to see how the audience sort of responds to the work and interacts with it. And it's like, it is important that there's, within those multiples that I make, that there are lots and lots of variations, and that people can find the one that sort of fits them, feel for them.
Yeah, definitely. Kelly/Wednesday asked, I've always admired your use and applications of glazes. Are these glazes that you make yourself?
Okay, so that's a great question. I have done in my career, I have done a ton of glaze research, and I have in general always worked with my own glazes. One of the limitations of the space that I'm working in now is that I just don't have space to, sort of set up a glazed kitchen and make my own glazes. So I've been working with shop glazes that we have at the Shadbolt Center where I teach, and just working with a really, really limited palette. And same thing here. I mean, there's this amazing glaze lab here, and it could have easily been a direction for me to, spend my month doing a lot of glaze testing, but instead I chose to just try a whole bunch of different clay bodies and see how they interacted with the shop glazes that are here. So yeah, I have in the past done a lot of glaze research and made my own glazes, but I'm also really happy to kind of work with the available materials and see what I can do with those.
Perfect. We have about 4 minutes left, so I think we can focus on this last question, and then Fredi, if you want to share any of your contact information in the chat, that would be great. Oh, there's two more. Let's try and squeeze them in. So Steve is asking, what has your focus been on, or what has your focus been in the month that you've been at Medalta here?
Oh, that's a really hard question. Zoe, when we first met, was asking me what my project was going to be, and I really got tongue-tied and flustered because I feel like I'm not very focused, and so I'm just sometimes I look around here and I just think I'm flailing about, but I'm making pots, and I'm using the wheel because I haven't really had done a lot of wheel work for a while, and so I'm kind of playing around with some thrown and stamped pots, and then I'm trying to sort of push some new ideas with this hand building method that I've been playing with, the pinch, the sort of coil building and pinching. It's a hybrid between slab building and coil building and pinching, and I'm really enjoying it. I really enjoy the way it's kind of spontaneous and not very controlled, and just trying to figure out what I can make out of it. So I don't know, not focused, but focused.
Yes, that actually sounds very pertinent to the whole pandemic experience as well.
Yeah.
Focused and unfocused at the same time. Just to wrap up here, we only have 2 minutes left, and I feel like the Zoom will just shut down at 1:30 because that's when we're scheduled to end. But Judy's asking any ideas on where you might be going next. You may feel lost, but I think of you as always exploring and growing. Having my favorite cup in front of me, which is very different from last year's, which I've been neglecting. Keep on, Fredi. Very happy to see your exploration.
So where am I going next?
Yeah.
Back to Vancouver. Actually, I'm very lucky. I will be doing another residency at the Shadbolt Center this August with a group of ceramic artists. So very excited about that.
Wonderful. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so if you're comfortable sharing your contact information in the chat here for everyone, you're welcome to do that, Fredi. Nicole is saying, it's very apparent to me when I look at your beautiful, deeply considered work that you have a clear understanding of your own why, that you understand why pots as a framework. To have the boundary can be so inspiring, and I really connect with how you can bring elements of every aspect of visual life into your pots, architecture, kitchen, textiles. In your work, I see and feel life. And George says, thank you all for the presentations and for sharing your amazing body of work. And I have to second that. Thank you very much, everyone, for showing up today and sharing your work with us and being vulnerable and taking our questions and sharing your past and previous experiences with us. And thank you to all of you for being so patient with us as we had to unfortunately reschedule our artist talk, but today was pretty drama-free. So I think that is something to be grateful for. If anyone has any questions, feel free to contact myself or Noriko. I'll put our emails here in the chat as well, and to reach out to any of the artists who presented today. And yeah, I think that wraps it up for all of us. Thank you very much for coming to share this time with us. And yeah, we're doing another round of artist talks next Monday, and we'll pass that information along to anyone curious. Bye, everyone.